Aaron, I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Oxnard, and this has become my project for Christina Aaronlund, A-E-R-E-N-L-U-N-D, Aaronlund. Christina.
I'm sorry.
No problem. So, how about we kind of go around the room and just tell us who you are and who you represent and how many organizations we've got in here. I know we have a sign-in sheet, but that's going to get you acquainted with each other. So you want to start?
Bob Allen from KDTV.com.
Mike McKinley, I'm with Bob and another company called Castle.
Pat DeFoya, Oxnard Heritage Cultural Center.
Welcome.
Victor Vallejo, Paul Mike. Paul Montgomery with the Heritage Cultural Center.
Ron West with Heritage Cultural Center.
Tino Montalongo, Heritage Cultural Center. Tony D, PressCarrier.org, plus Oxnard College Sports. Oxnard College Sports.
Sports. Steven Salinas, Steve Almack. And Carlos Lucia for the Community Multimedia Center. Here,
Theodora David Cummings with OMAC, Oxnard Media Access Channel. Katie Rivera, OMAC.
Steve Nash, OMAC.
Travis Kelly, OMAC.
Dan Pineda, OMAC Incorporated.
George Sorkin, OMAC Incorporated.
OMAC.
Elizabeth, Josephine Waller Foundation.
Gary Abraham, State Foundation.
Evan Carpenter, Tax Fees. Ron Hall, Cap Stevie Ventura.
And Goodwin was also
Okay, excellent. Well, welcome to all of you. And so how many of you have reviewed the RFP that we have posted and was sent to you? Everyone? Okay, good. This is Steve Fisher, the city attorney, the interim city attorney. That's him. And he's here to answer any legal questions that might be, or he might help me figure some of these things out. So, of those of you who have, do you have any particular questions on the instructions that are outlined in the RFP? No? Okay. I can send you a phone Not waste your time. Okay. Just to reiterate, the proposal needs to be in upstairs in the purchasing office by 4 p.m. on July 25th. So you still have some time to finish your proposal. We'll need one original and 5 copies and a sealed envelope. And it needs to be turned in there, not at the city clerk's office, not at the city manager's office, not in chambers. It needs to be delivered specifically to purchase.
Christina, I have a question on that. How do you determine what is the original, what is the copy?
How about you tell us? And Mark?
They're all out of the same copy.
Well, we'll need one with signature on it, so we're going to guess that the original signature might give us a clue. But, I'm going to go with, you're going to designate what the original is, and yet the rest of them are copies. So that's the, now the history of what's happened to public access, I'm sure you're all familiar with. You need me to run you through it. Some of you already work in public access, don't you?
It's easy to understand what's going on here, especially since you already have some people different.
Well,
I could hear the question.
yes. I could hear. Our question was, it would be good to go through it, since there's so many people here already from public access, what happened in Oxnard. I'm going to that before I correct. The city used to have an agreement with, I'm going to stop at Time Warner, but it would go far back enough to start with Jones and Cable, which expired in 2008. At that time, Time Warner chose to, within that agreement, Time Warner provided the studio and the education, and I'm gonna stick with public access and not deal with the other 4 access channels.
I don't know how that you need to get into terrible amount of detail since it's already in the material. So if you've reviewed the materials and you have questions about what's stated in there, then please ask away. But we're not here to possibly contradict what's in here off the top of our heads in explaining the history. So we put it in there for your review. So if you have any questions, please ask.
There you go.
The only people who don't know about it is people from the Ventura community.
And just to complete that thought is public access went away as a result because Time Warner no longer wanted to fund it and the city had no funds to do so. So there have been several attempts to bring an operator, and we're here on our 3rd attempt to do it again. So we're hoping this will take. Any other questions on that? Okay. Now, on the issue of implementation, we have had a few questions. Do you have any questions about how to, what you need to be doing with the public access channel? What are the tasks that you have to complete? No? Yeah, I'm liking this meeting.
Since I've been stifled.
Pardon?
Since your friend on the left has stifled conversation.
Well, do you have a question on what's been put in the package?
No, I have a question. We talked about what preceded this, and back in my head, I remember reading something in the Star a few years ago, about 2011, where a group was starting up public access. And, you know, is that the immediate predecessor of this request?
No, it's not. When did the channel operations end?
2008.
Okay, so it's not a predecessor to this. It was a prior attempt to bring in a new operator. I think is what you're referring to.
So we
You already have the operators too, right?
no, they're not, no, we have no operators now.
It's currently not being operated, which is the
Operate.
purpose of the RFP is to bring in someone to operate it.
The 2011 RFP then was never granted?
No. Okay. Yes, it was granted. It was granted. There were some deadlines that needed to be met, which weren't, and so council said go back out for the RFP.
It was never really implemented after being granted.
Any other questions about that?
A follow-up on that. Was the RFP similar to this RFP?
No. Council had directed us to do what they considered an informal RFP, which we did, and then council picked the operator themselves.
That was the,
And directed us to enter into an MOU.
and this is more formal.
This is, yeah, now they asked us for a more formal one in an effort to make sure that this time we have what we need and we can move forward.
Christina, wasn't it this, the direction of council to ask for a nonprofit organization to apply for this RFP? And
That
was
too.
it was it one of the specifics of the last time?
It wasn't, but you're correct, we didn't make any specific requests, but council did make a specific
This
request.
time.
Yes. Nevertheless, the last applicant ended up being a nonprofit.
Okay.
So as I move along, I'm going to go to page, since you all understand it. Oh, the single sheet here that you received, when it comes to the execution of the MOU, and so this is down the line, but if you believe you have a good chance, you may want to start collecting these documents because they're always, it takes a while to get them together, and when the MOU is prepared for you to review and sign, all of this stuff needs to be in place. That was one of the things that kept the other applicant from signing fast enough, because some of these documents were not available and he had to go get them. So I'm putting them, I'm outlining there for you so that you know that we will be requiring that when we go to execute the MOU.
Christina,
Yes.
is it standard operating procedure to require nonprofits to have a city business tax certificate?
Yes, because you've got to pay taxes, you've got to file tax returns, even if you don't pay taxes. It is a federal requirement. You have to have a city, some are going to run through them. You're going to have a city license to operate in the city, or to operate business, to operate any kind of business in the city. So you have to have your tax ID to go to our licensing, and they will waive the fee, but you need to register as a nonprofit with them. So you're going to have that, the city business tax certificate. And then the insurance coverage, I want to make sure that it is clear that there's a general liability which we ask for on all businesses, but we want a broadcast liability, media perils, insurance. And I'm sure most of you know why that the city cannot be liable for anything that happens on the air or the channel.
Okay, I do understand the liability part and the insurance coverage. Does that insurance coverage have to be purchased prior to it receiving the award of the nonprofit organization?
I'm going to go with no, but you may want to do all your research, because it's tough to find who provides that and what it means.
Okay, that's
And of course, the workers' compensation, employer liability. Now, if you have an employee, you're going to have this. If you're all volunteers, then we need a letter to that effect stating that you do not have, and you do not pay, that you don't have a payroll. Okay, because again, that tax ID is where you have to report that kind of activity. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that every one of you knew that we needed these documents, because they end up being a difficult thing to proceed with the MOU. Any questions? Yes.
On the auto liability, is that a requirement if there's no auto in the corporation?
I'm not sure how that works, and I apologize for that, but basically, if you are in your automobile conducting business for whatever organization, and you get hurt or you hurt someone, you could, or they could want to sue the organization. So, and then we're the deep pockets. So that's the reasoning behind it.
We had a question regarding the insurance. In reference, even though it's an indirect question, it's in reference to the timing, because the operator is going to have a time period in order to put the programming on the air that receives from the community. Is the city planning to enforce the errors and omissions, media, perils, insurance, not only for the operator, but also for the independent producers?
No, it's only for the operator. We're only requesting it
Because
for
in
the
a
operator.
commercial TV environment, the channel operator has its own policy, and then if you are doing business with that TV station, you as a producer are required to have your own media coverage as well. So will the city not require that? Because that may be some time for that group to be able to acquire that insurance, and it puts some time window into play.
Right. The operators will, and we are requiring to have that kind of, because the operator will be the one who decides what ultimately goes on the air within the parameters of and we know that when it comes to public access, there's a lot of freedom out there. And therefore, we are just, I'm not sure, Stephen, would they be allowed to require that from their producers? Because that would be an operations thing with the manager, whoever is
Well,
operating.
it may be a feasibility issue because the whole point of this is to allow members of the community who aren't sophisticated independent producers like you referenced to come in and use this facility. And I don't know that some high school media club is going to have the wherewithal to get media apparel insurance.
That's what I'm getting to, that maybe the operator should take that into consideration in order to, maybe that policy should cover to extend to the producers that the operator may engage, but that's a different operation.
That is an operation, an operator's
Correct.
Yes.
I could maybe help them out there just
Okay.
real quick.
Thank
Is that in our situation, we don't require producers to carry their own insurance. However, when we submit the program, they sign a form that says they accept responsibility for copyright infringement and those kinds of things. So we don't require them to carry insurance, but we make them sign a document that says they're assuming liability for copyright. So that's what it's at. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on these insurance requirements and other documents? Okay. So let's jump over to page 8, where we're talking about the successful, what you must prepare. So you must be ready to do all these fun things here, plus some, I'm sure. CAPS knows how to run and operate such a facility and service, because they've been doing it for many years. And if there's anything that, any questions that you have here regarding that, I think you need to know read this several times so you know exactly what's expected of you, because we could come back and say, well, you're not meeting these requirements, then. Okay, so does anybody want to know a little bit more about the expectation in terms of how the staging process? The staging. You don't, you're not expected to have a studio as soon as the MOU is in place. So what sorts of things, do you have any questions about what sorts of things we need to be doing? No? Pardon me?
I said, you're really liking this meeting.
I'm really liking this meeting. Everybody seems to know that. Well, I don't know, sometimes I feel a little bit like a teacher who asks, do you all understand? And everybody says yes, and then they're in the classroom and they didn't understand it all. So, but you are still free from this meeting until that day to ask questions, and we will answer them in writing. All right, so in page 10, so we'll need from you a narrative, how you propose to do that multi-phase. We need to know phase 1, phase 2, if you want to go 5 phases, but exactly which one each one will contain and how you're going to implement it and how much time you think you're going to need, and the budget that you think is going to be required to do that, and how you're going to break it down in terms of personnel, whether it's volunteer or not, the value of the personnel, equipment, space, and all sorts of things. So how many of you are aware of what is needed in producing any kind of product? TV, video. Well, I know you do. So I know you do. Okay. So as long as you have, and in that narrative, we need to know that you have people who are capable in that area, that know that have experience, and so you provide us with a resume that tells us what they've done and how they've done it and how long they've been in the business. So those 2 experience, we want to know what the experience of each one of the people involved is.
Sorry, excuse me. Are the operators required to produce content? Are we supposed to teach?
No, you're not required to produce content, no.
So we really don't need to have
You can, I guess, but you don't have to. Well, you have to have so much content,
Not
but
necessarily by the operator, though.
not by the operator.
I don't believe the, unless I am not recalling having that in there, but I thought that the operator was to make it available for the producers of the content to air it.
So there's no requirement, but the reason we need to know if you know what you're doing is because we need to know if you're going to know how to handle the people who are doing it. It's a little bit like a manager of any organization. They got to know the job that their people are doing so that they can properly supervise it. So it is important that we know that you have people experienced in the area plus I'm going to go with the training that you're going to be provided would be done by the operator in some way, or with personnel from the operator. Financial management. I mean, you're going to have to demonstrate that you have experience in the operation of a channel. Now you know that we only have really one broadcast channel, which broadcasts on two different, I want to call it outlets. Channel 10 with Time Warner and 35 with Verizon Fios. But Verizon Fios piggybacks on Time Warner, so basically you've got the same thing playing all the time on both channels. Then we'll need to know what your financial resources are, how you intend to raise funds to do that. If you intend and anticipate that you're going to be requesting that the city provide some funding, you're going to have to tell us, well, this is what we need, and we're going to have to, get the money somewhere, and we're hoping that the city is going to. So then the council will know what your expectations are in that area. So I think number 4 is pretty clear. We need a narrative not to exceed 3 one-sided, not double-sided space. What your potential future funding sources, grants and foundation money. So if you think there are grants out there that you can apply for and so forth, please include them in your proposal. If you have any audited financial statements, we'd like to see those. And the organization's most recent year operational budget. Again, if you have it. If not, give us an idea of what it would look like. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll need a list of names of your principal officers, members of the board, and explain the responsibilities. Your nonprofit status, we need to have proof of that. And your flow chart, if you have one, your articles of incorporation, and so forth. Some of the same documents you need at the end of this. What is your organization's philosophy, and any pertinent documents that you think we need to be looking at. And I just need you to know that in the process, what we'll do is when we receive and open your proposals, which would all be done, they will all be opened at the same time, we will first, what the city staff will do is we'll look and see that you have everything that you were asked to have in the document. And then we will be calling on colleagues who do this, and I guess we're not going to be calling Channel 6, to review. There will be a panel, an independent panel, who are going to then evaluate your proposals. And I already have some people from outside the city and in other counties who have agreed to review the materials. And they run, or have run, or are attorneys that have to do with public access channels. So on page 12, we are giving you what the points are going to be for the stuff, each of the categories, and how many points you will get from each. We will be breaking down subcategories for the evaluators, and then in the end, what we'll present to council will be, this is what we got from each of the proponents. These are their scores, and these are we ask the evaluators for recommendations regarding each of the applicants. We have also added a draft memorandum of understanding. I know that if we need to make any adjustments or changes to it, that's why it's a draft, because we will have that discussion with the awardee. And then we have also given you attachments for the kind, what your insurance documents and endorsements need to look like. And most insurance companies know exactly what to do with these documents. So it's always better to send it to them and say, hey, we need for you to fill these out and get them to the city. But those won't be required until the MOU is in place. So other than that, I have nothing to add to this, and if you have any further questions regarding this material, I'd be happy to answer them if I know. Otherwise, we'll do it in writing on the internet.
I'm just curious, who's taking care of the broadcasting of the city council meetings and things like that?
That's our government channel, and I have staff that does that. And that's just the government channel. And the educational, we have 3 educational channels, and the Oxnard School District, the Oxnard High School District, and Oxnard College manage their own. So we can hear them all.
Excuse me. I noticed your government channel has the Rotary basketball tournaments on there. I mean, is there a chance for other organizations like Oxnard College or?
That's because it has to do specifically with our recreation department. So it's not just the Rotary, it's our recreation, it's a partnership. So, you know, if we say the Adidas boxing thing, it's because PAL is a government, there's a partnership going on there. So typically, we don't air anything that is not either city-sponsored or city partnerships or oversight. Because then we have, that's why public access is so critical here.
So in order to get any of Oxnard College, we just need to work with the city some more. Have you sponsored?
In fact, you know, they partner with recreation, so that's why we are. And it's recreation who delivers that material to us.
Okay, so I should talk to Recreation then.
I'm sorry?
I should talk to Recreation.
Probably. Yes, I think it's a good idea. Any more? So you're all set?
We
Yes.
have one question in reference to evaluation and selection.
Yes.
Once this panel of experts is put in place,
Yes.
and the proposals come in, and there is a beautiful system of point system, and then one proposal receives 98 points, and another one receives 60. Does that mean the 98 points is the one selected, or what happens after that?
I don't know how to answer that. Typically, yes. If it's a formal RFP, typically the best proposer gets it. Now, this is kind of how can I call it? It's a hybrid. It's an RFQ, RFP. So it's we're requesting qualifications. So it's not just a proposal for the money, but there's qualifications. Right now, I would imagine that anybody who has all of the qualifications will get the higher scores because the people who will be doing the evaluation are people who know and run such channels. So typically we would recommend, if you're asking me, when I bring it to council, I would recommend that the higher score gets. Yes. Now what the council decides is up to the council.
So it's a recommendation from this panel. This is the highest score, but not necessarily the panel decides.
No, the panel does not
The
decide.
city council after that may decide one that has a lower point.
The city council will decide. Ultimately, I will bring the item to council. I will tell them what the panel has and what the panel has come up with and their recommendations one way or the other. And then I just just leave it up to council, I step back and listen to what they tell me.
Question on pay, public education, government. The education section you've spoken to, the government section you've spoken to. We're speaking to the public section now, which has been inactive for a number of years.
Correct.
Dollars have been coming in during all those years that have been used by government for the G, and education for the E. There's a pool of dollars that have been coming in from the public part of that funding pool.
I'm gonna let Steve answer that question.
No, that's incorrect. The PEG portion of the fees paid by the state franchisee are for use for capital improvements as the city directs, not necessarily broken into P, E, G.
So all the funds, the absence of public access has been a beneficiary to the other two sections or to the city?
No, it's not an even allocation. There's no statutory allocation to the capital improvement funds that come in.
So what would be the allocation to the P section in this RFP?
That would be up to the council. So as you can see, the RFP does not have that in the paperwork. We do have something here that says it would be up to the council to what extent they would provide funding for the P in terms of capital funds.
Which is restricted totally to the purchase of capital items.
So is the law right now, right? That's the way it is.
As per
Yeah, as per DIFCA.
DIFCA,
Yes.
yes.
PUC actually. For the moment. Now, for operations, that's another story. We don't know at this point. Council has consistently expressed that the budget, there's no allocation in the budget for it, but that doesn't mean that council is not going to do anything. That's a conversation that has to happen once the MOU is in place. Has been awarded, and then that discussion can happen. They're not saying no, but they're not saying yes in terms of the operating money. Because I know that in Ventura, we use the franchise fees for that, but those, in our city, they go straight to the general fund. You have a question?
I
can see
that.
that. I can see that.
I just have a question for, I just wanted to know if you do acquire the station, will you be running out of Ventura or will you come to Oxnard to run it?
If something that is equally beneficial to our adjoining community could be arranged where both service areas could be treated fairly, leaving the burden more or less a little different for each, that would be most desirable. The RFP as laid out here lays a huge burden on whatever organization wishes to even think about it, because until you've run a PEG facility, you have no idea of the nuts and bolts costs that will show up. Ideally, something could be formed that would help the general area. But this RFP is excluding so much. It appears, and maybe my friend at the table could help me again, the person who gets the franchise or the contract, are they excluded from making partnerships with the community college, the high school district, and other libraries, other facilities?
I think that's part of the proposal that would be considered.
Yeah, you would have to, in your proposal, let us know that you have a partnership, and we would have to, and I would suggest that there is a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding with that. For example, if you wanted to go with Oxnard College, there's been a lot of conversation about using Oxnard College. Well, you'd have to get something from the Oxnard College in your proposal that says, yes, indeed, we're going to work with them and we have an agreement in place. Yes.
It's an important question because it says in page 4 here that that's specifically excluded.
Well, we excluded as you're going to be, it's a good question because I struggled with that paragraph. I struggled with that paragraph. The point being is that you don't get automatic use of any of those facilities. You have to enter into an agreement to make it.
That's what contract is. But the only reason I was asking that question is because this is Oxnard Community Access Channel, and so this is going to benefit our city here for our residents in the city of Oxnard. That to me is a very concern as a resident.
Yeah, if I could just address that real quick too. If this goes before city council, we're proposing to run it out of our Ventura facility. I don't think the city council probably will see that too well.
Oh, I know, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your answers.
You can have partnerships. It just needs to be in your proposal that they're legitimate partners. A statement that the Oxnard College is willing to work with is not going to fly. It needs to be a concrete proposal that you have in place with any of the organizations that you think you're going to need.
Well, I think it's important, that just us being here does not mean that we're definitely going to make a proposal. We
No,
came out
that's
of curiosity and we're very collaborative. We reach out on a broad level. We've had a lot of Oxnard activities that have approached us and said, can you bring us in on this too? But we do some wonderful things for the public. So we thought we'd come and hear about this and see if there is a way to link the
And with that being said, I would just like to say that since this process has been going on for quite a few years, we would hope that everybody at the table would at some way, somehow, consider collaborating together with each other because that would be a win-win situation. We know that it's very expensive to put on a program like this. We want it to be successful. Without collaboration, we are not going to have success. So if there's somebody here that is not willing to cooperate, then I think it's time to step off the door.
But this is for an RFP process, and if we have 35 different people making proposals, and they go outside and decide to join forces and do that, that's up to you
Which is
entirely.
great. I think that's great.
So on that score, the only way we can assist with that, if you choose to go that way, is unless anybody has any objection, we will email you your sign-in sheets and you can choose to have that discussion amongst yourself.
One of the things we discussed was the possibility of generating physical playback from Ventura, but have the production, camera checkouts and so forth be here, be in Oxnard. But to take advantage of existing infrastructure, that's one of the things we discussed.
Exactly.
And the cost.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you have that discussion outside of this environment. Yes.
In terms of a question on page 14A, I would like an explanation of number 4 and number 5, considering that this is public access. Because these are things you need to know. You're being restricted from doing, which appears to be First Amendment rights.
If the dam breaks and there's a flood on the way, we're going to preempt your programming to issue a warning.
That's the thing.
You're not exercising prior restraint.
In a disaster, no?
I think under four we're not, and if
Forget about
if
that.
under 5, there's some issue where we've been, let's say, somebody shows us an injunction on airing some copywritten material that they don't want aired on public access, and we may act on that, or at least look into our options on how we can act on that.
So if someone calls the city council some nasty names on their soapbox on public access, you would certainly approve of that.
Well, we air that on the government channel, so I think.
And this is what I'm saying.
You may make it cover Facebook.
Right on, Steve. And by the way, prior public access touch them. I mean,
No,
they-
it's very
that
clear.
was not- That was not our role. So if there was an interview, there used to be an interview program, it was all about slamming city council. Well, it's their opinion.
It does give you the option to do that, though, according to 5. It says, if it's in its sole and unfettered discretion, the city determines that it's not consistent with the MOU, the city may unilaterally require operator not to air the program. It gives you a right to censor the program, as our concern.
Well, it may be a concern, and it may be an actionable concern if it's exercised improperly, but the provision stays in it.
Okay? You're jumping out of that seat already, what is that? So are we boring you or something? Okay.
Yeah. Another issue, the organization is required to set up an operational manual. She'll provide for the policies, for scheduling programs transmitted on the Oxnard Public AC. The following says that the city or operator may amend the manual at any time. Now, these are private organizations. They're running an organization by request and agreement made with the city. They have set up a policy which governs how they operate, how they hand out equipment, if there are fines involved, and all this stuff. They also have policies on their volunteers or any of their paid staff. Now, as an independent organization, they have the right and the obligation to make their own rules. This says the city, probably in the event of a hurricane or something like that, could change.
Well, that would be great, no.
Maybe it needs to just be reworded a little bit.
Well, I think that this is an argument we need to have with the, with the awardee at the time of signing them. If the person, the group receives this, is chosen and they choose to have that argument, well, we'll be happy to have that argument. We'll let Steve have that argument with, or whichever attorney's appointed at the time. I mean, this is a draft document that we have provided for you so you have an idea of what that's going to look like. And at the time that you come in to sign a document, you will look at it and say, well, that's not what we want to make these changes. And we'll have that discussion with you. I think this is premature in terms of today's article. Okay, yes?
At that point, would you go back to the original list?
What point? The point where we are having that discussion
You were
with
an
the...
award, the one that's awarded the MOU,
No, it wasn't.
and come to an agreement, you go back to the original list?
No, we have to go back out. We have to go back out. But I don't expect that to happen. So I don't know what the, again, this is something that is way out. We still have a couple of weeks for you to submit your proposals and a few weeks to have them evaluated before we come to council with any of them. So I would ask that we don't get into the discussion of what that MOU is finally going to look like, because it would be between the person with the organization that is awarded the, what is it, I was going to say, the contract, and the city for the final agreement, how that language is going to be.
Keep in mind, in that case, the city does, as stated on page 5 of the material, city reserves the right to reject any and all proposals, and as Christina said, go back to the drawing board and issue a new RFP.
Anybody? Anything else? I'm just waiting for another one to come up. Testing.
On page A18, we speak of copyright. This is a very technical matter. It says the operator shall hold the copyright for all programs. Is the operator the local entity that's running the peg?
Yeah. Isn't that?
So they're gonna hold the copyright on everything?
Is that in?
Number 18.
Again, we're drilling down on the MOU itself, so I would love to have your advice on what that needs to look like. But I'm not sure this is the place to be arguing drilling down on the MOU language at this point. Yes?
I think any board that tries to usurp the copyright from the user has a really tough go.
Yeah, but why assume that headache by RFP?
Well, it is problems with some RFP.
Well, lots of
Can I ask you one reading from, you said,
Page A18,
section?
item I,
Item I, okay.
because if you're gonna be, some kid comes in and he's playing a piano solo, or you're out on the street doing a parade and they play Stars and Stripes Forever, there are definitely copyrighted materials involved.
I tend to agree with you. I think there's producers in our community, in your community, that are producing very artistic content. And I would have a problem for anybody to deny them the right of their copyright material.
Okay, well, we'll have that discussion when the time comes. Anything else that has nothing to do with the MOU, please?
Anything from anybody.
No, I'll be happy to sit with you.
So I've got pages and pages of
Okay,
them.
so I'm looking at, enough? All right, thank you very much. And don't hesitate to send your questions by email to me.